I'm ready to start.
All right, we're here with Man Parrish.
That's a me.
Legendary Electro Master. And I am Sean from TurntableTreats.com. And
legendary is a word that's used after you turn past 40 years old. Instead of them calling you old, they use words like legendary.
Now.
Another word for old.
Legendary means just that.
Means old fart. Means you've been around too long. You're legendary, and we can't get rid of you, so you're legendary. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to start off with what you're doing currently.
Music-wise, or
music production-wise? Music production-wise.
Music production-wise, I'm not doing a hell of a lot. I'm DJing, and a couple of remixes come flying in here or there. I'm doing most of my stuff doing my club promotions and DJing right now.
Where are your gigs now?
I am in between gigs. Actually, I'm talking to a place called Shelter in Manhattan and another place called the Taj Lounge in Manhattan.
Is that Shelter like the Shelter?
Yep, the Shelter, yeah.
Amazing. Definite history there.
I'm getting that room once a month on Saturday nights, and I'm going to see if I can pull in some named DJs from like 12 to 6 a.m., and then after 6 a.m., I'll go do an after-hours trip.
That was a massive househead venue.
Yeah, with actually Steve Travolta right now, and what's his name? Quentin Harris. We met the other day. It was really cool. The both of them are really going into the deep house trip, which is really nice. They're moving it down to another location. There's a newer club opening up down on Varick Street, and Varick and Van Dam. So I know the owner of Shelter Space there, and he says, well, you want it every Saturday night? And I went, I don't think I want it every Saturday night. He said, how about once a month? And I said, sure.
Isn't that near Europa Disc?
Yet, but we're looking at it.
That's down near Europa Disc pressing plant, isn't it, Varick Street?
Yeah. Is Europa Disc still there?
I believe so.
There you go.
They're still kicking. So what kind of stuff do you play in your sets?
I'm doing a lot of classics and a lot of mashup stuff. I do a wide range. I'll slow down to hip hop. At the end of the night, I'll play some jazzy crap. Beginning of the night, I can start off with stuff like Enigma and then go into high-powered, hands in the air kind of dance music. So it really depends on what the crowd's feeling. If I'm playing some regular, some current stuff or some Euro stuff, and they're dancing but they're not really excited, then I'll slip in something. I'll test the waters, throw in a dance classic, and if they just start going woo, then I'll put another one. And if I notice the energy is picking up, then I'll do an hour of that stuff to keep people happy.
Now, do you have different sets for different crowds, or do you have like signature songs?
No, I actually play. I mean, I'm not going to walk into a hip hop club with something that's 150 beats per minute.
Right.
We're going to put some pause just for 1 second.
Sure.
I got an incoming call that I have to take.
No problem.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm somebody's doing a recorded interview on the other phone on the other line. You're okay, right? Okay. Bye. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Very good friend of mine just had a pacemaker put in, so he had a weird experience, had to run to the doctor. I stayed with him on the phone until he got to his cardiologist, and
cool.
I'll be back to let me know he's going to live. So
that's definitely a good thing.
You're going to live? Okay, call you back. You're going to die? All right, I'll put the other person on.
Yeah, right? You're alive.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
the DJ set, so you play, your set does vary greatly.
It varies greatly. I'm not going to walk into a hip hop club with with an electro class set or something like that, which I can do too. Since I'm,
since you dabbled
on the roots of all that kind of stuff.
But definitely not legendary, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, electro kids think I'm legendary. It depends on the crowd. I mean, I'm not going to play I wouldn't play, drum and bass at a gay club, and I wouldn't play, high-energy dance music at a hip-hop club. Not that I get a lot of hip-hop bookings. I'm not really down there. But, I mean, if I get any bookings like that, it's more because I'm playing stuff like Planet Rock and, AEIOU and all the stuff from back there, the old freestyle stuff, when they're doing a classics night, So I'm a musician, I'm a producer, so it varies. I can play anything. I use CDJ 1000 turntables, which, God, I could take something from 96 beats a minute up to 130 beats a minute and kind of make it work with those variable speed CD players, and the pitch doesn't change, so I can slide not almost anything to anything, but almost anything to anything with a mix.
Is there any kind of stuff that you prefer playing? Is there any stuff that you feel
I like
best?
classics. I like a lot of old house stuff. I like stuff from the 80s and the 90s currently. I go through all kinds of phases. I mean, I love groups like Underworld and Prodigy, and I went through a phase like that. And then I went through my, Electro Clash phase, and I actually like a lot of the Euro dance music, which a lot of people think is tacky and cheap and
cheeky,
and kiddie music and stuff like that. But some of the stuff I like. I mean, I don't always need music to be dark and depressing and real cerebral, and it's going to make me, have some deep inner feeling. I mean, yeah, I go there, and I can go there for long extended sets, but sometimes I just want to have fun, and sometimes it's like I'm feeling kind of little under the weather. Hey, let's put on some up music and just forget about all the bullshit and have some fun.
You don't want to listen to at that present time sad bastard music, which is what they call it in the High Fidelity movie.
Right. No. I mean, I can get into depressed mode. You know what I mean? Or I could play some dark mixes and stuff like that. Stuff like Merc, I love.
Right. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And all that. I mean, I can definitely get into that. But sometimes the crowd isn't like that. You got to realize, what I listen to personally and what I DJ can be two very different things. I mean, if I'm home, I listen to internet radio. I turn on the Drone Zone or something like that at night just to chill out, or some ambient stuff. If I really need to wake up, I'll, put on Music One, which is just pop Euro hits, or I'll put on one of the house, dance streams or something like that. I've got an incredible rock and roll 70s collection. I can do, Immigrant Song, and then I got the Vita and slip into James Brown and all that. When I DJ, I travel with 1,200, CDs. They're called books, and so I have a massive variety. I could do an ambient set if I wanted to.
Now, those MP3 CDs?
A good chunk of them now are.
Wow.
But I bought a lot of stuff before. The MP3 CDs are great because I'm getting rid of all the bullshit. So each CD with 12 or 14 tracks on it could be one hit after another, whereas the bought CDs may only have one or two hits and a lot of filler. So as I'm going towards the MP3 CDs, they're getting, fuller and fuller with music that I can actually use. So, it would be probably the equivalent of 3,000 CDs, if it was put the other way.
Yeah, how long have you been spinning for?
I started, I've been doing my spring party for about 7 years, 8, 9, about 9 years, 10 years. Out of, I learned DJing out of desperation. I didn't like what people were spinning, and I started a party. And I played at a bar, and I basically had to learn how to spin. Decided to go to CDs instead of vinyl, just because the technology was there, and I figured that's where it was going. And I didn't want to bring crates and crates of records. I used to work in clubs, and you'd see at the end of the night the poor DJ was sitting there with a hand truck and 4 crates of vinyl, and they had to wait for their friend with the van to come by, and it's tired, it's the end of the night, and you just want to go home. And I used to feel for them, and the club, of course, would be on a 2-story or 3-story walk-up.
Craziness.
It was like moving furniture. Yeah.
So you've always been CDs then?
As a DJ, yes. I've never actually touched vinyl for DJing. I probably, since I know how to, do CD and backspin and, I'm not a turntablist. I can't do that kind of stuff, but I can cue stuff up and, and sync stuff up. I could probably slide into vinyl if I had to.
Right.
If they said you lost your CDs, use my record collection, you have to go on now, I could probably figure it out.
Right. Same principle.
What's up?
It's the same principle.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the same principle. I deal with samples. I deal with syncing up stuff. When we did hip hop bebop, there were no sequences around. There was no master clock that everything sunk up to, either a sequencer or SMPTE, which was is the motion picture code. That's timing code that you see on the top of a little screen when little numbers are running. That was used at first before the extensive MIDI stuff to synchronize two tape machines together, a tape machine and a video machine together. And later on, they used some of the very early sequencers to sync it up to your tape. I was around before that stuff, so I had to constantly sync a drum machine to a sequencer. Well, usually you lay down your drum machine first, and then you'd have to stop your sequencer to lay down a track so it was in sync. So I know how to match beats up. I've been doing it by default way before I even DJ'd. As a producer, I had to do it because there wasn't the technology there. And we would record drums, and then I'd lay down a sequence bass line, and you'd start at the beginning of the tape, and you'd go 6 or 8, 12 bars, and it'd start to run out of sync, and then, it was a two-person operation. Someone would rewind the tape and get, 10 or 11 bars, and then I would try to hit it on a downbeat and punch in and keep going, you know what I mean? And, sometimes it'd get sloppy, and you have to go in and clean it up, and then you'd lay down some, sequence percussion stuff, or this is even before samples and stuff. So I'm used to doing that beat matching way back when.
The beat matching thing's always been there.
Yeah, for me it has actually. So translating it into digital CDs and looping and doing live mashups and live remixes became really just second nature. It's like, oh, there's a bass line there. I could loop it, and let me throw it on top of this track over here. If there's a good enough, if there's a rain mixer or something like that where I could take out the bass, I could replace the bass line of one track, CD with the song of another. You have instant remix, instant mashup.
Yeah, on the fly, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is great because then DJing becomes a whole secondary. It's no longer, you're no longer a jukebox and a surgeon who can gracefully slide from track to track. You suddenly have a creative media palette, and now you're not only DJing, but you're kind of performing using. Instead of using sequencers and synthesizers as your palette, you're using other people's music CDs as your palette to kind of blend all this stuff together. So you're creating stuff live.
Yeah,
and it's funny because if you do it really well, I mean, sometimes your ego gets in there and I'm saying, oh man, wait till they hear this. I'm going to put this with this and I'm going to mix it live, and it's just going to blow everybody's minds right now. And you do it and you're looking around and everybody's kind of just like, wow, cool, they're dancing, and you go, don't they realize what I'm doing? I have 2 CDs spinning, I have 3 CDs spinning here, man, and it's all in sync, and I'm doing a remix. But if you do it good enough, it's transparent.
Yeah, they can't notice.
You know what I mean? So that was a little bit of a shock I had to, get used to. It's like, I'm busting my ass over here, and I'm doing these incredible mixes, and nobody appreciates me, and blah, blah, blah. Then I realized, wait, maybe you're doing it good, and it's not a car crash, and people just figure that's the record that you put on.
Like one piece, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's, they don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So that's why you can do that with vinyl, but you can't loop a bass line for 8 minutes on vinyl.
Very true.
And on vinyl you have to constantly attend to it. You have to lift that, fade it out, lift the needle up, sync it back up again, remix it back into your mix, and hopefully you didn't lose track of how many bars you were on that bass loop that you're running. On the C stuff, I can just put it into a loop and go away. And there's actually been times when I'll start some CDs with a loop, and I forget to release the loop, and I'm digging through my records, and my headphones are queued up to the next thing. My friend would come to the DJ booth, and do you know the bass line's been going for 3 minutes without any vocals? Or I was like, oh my God, take it out of loop. Oops, sorry, folks.
Yeah, right. Depending on what time of the night, they might not even notice. Depending on what kind of time of the night it is.
Exactly. How fucked up they are. Yeah, exactly. So
you're strictly a CD man, then. Have you ever?
I'm a CD man because I could also make my own CDs. I could take test pressings. I could take my own stuff that I do. I could do stuff in Live, which is Mac software, which is kind of like what's the PC
Acid
version of the stamp stuff? The hell, I can't remember the
Acid.
Yeah, it's like Acid Pro for Mac, or I can use Track to DJ Studio and just line stuff up and then burn it to a CD.
Cool.
I'll have it ready to go. Pop it in, bang, it's there.
Were you ever into vinyl?
I was never into vinyl. No. I was a record collector.
You were a collector.
From new wave and punk and rock and roll days. Yeah, but I didn't know about record stores. I was too young then, so I wasn't 14 years old digging through crates.
Right.
Because there wasn't crates at 14 years old. You went to Sam Goody and you bought, whoever's album. I think I bought a Grand Funk Railroad album, and the Ziggy Stardust album and stuff like that. There wasn't. I was before 12-inch records, so there wasn't the stuff that you didn't sit there digging through crates.
Did you collect your own vinyl?
In the beginning I did, because it was a novelty. Here's my record coming out, in Europe. Here's my record on RCA Mexico. Here's the Australian one. Here's the one from Holland, So it was kind of, I had my own little collection of my own stuff, because it was kind of like cool, But I actually have the same equivalent in CDs. I have about 40 CDs of stuff that I've done for other people myself that came out, compilations and things like that.
Cool.
In that sense, I collect my own stuff. It kind of, when you don't get paid on your music, at least you can collect some vinyl and some CDs, and it's like, well, you did do something. You are worth something. There is something out there. If you don't get paid and you have nothing sitting in front of you, then your motivation to go on drops pretty quickly.
I'm sure with all the downloading stuff now, I'm sure people are getting exposed to your stuff that would have never even known about it.
Well, absolutely, because the labels are no longer pressing. A couple of labels are pressing vinyl, and a couple of vinyl junkies with little mini labels will license my stuff for me and put it out, and every year, a couple of 1,000 pressings here or there, or in a compilation will pop out. But as far as digital downloading, I have the rights to that. It's sitting on my server, and you go to manparrish.com and get, download my stuff. And it's not going to wear out. It's not going to bend. It's not going to warp. It's not going to scratch. There are advantages to vinyl. It's a lot warmer sounding. You know what I mean? It's definitely a different sound, but as long as there's electricity, there's my server. In theory, it could last forever,
And you can't get a record onto your iPod either.
Yeah, you can't get a record on your iPod, exactly.
Kind of
also, other than some of the new, very high-end CD players, you also can't touch the record like you can with vinyl, which is very tactile. A lot of purist DJing with vinyl is a very tactile touch thing. You feel it, you're absorbing it into your psyche. You're turning the discs, and you're like molding clay with your hands. It's great.
It's almost like a fixation.
Yeah, exactly. It's very addicting. Well, the addiction is not the physical. The addiction is the endorphin rush that you get. The satisfaction of doing good music and looking up and seeing other people enjoying what you're doing. So, in that sense, it's addicting. It's a power trip because you can control a whole room full of people. If you play... I used to work in a fetish club, and called Hellfire here in New York, an underground fetish club. If we played heavy rock and roll music at the time, which I was kind of very into, we would have fights. If I put on I forgot what was around it, that like Electric Light Orchestra and, more mellow, not hard, acid rock. People would chill out and, do their business and leave, and we wouldn't have problems. You can work a crowd into a frenzy, and you can overwork a crowd and exhaust them. I've had situations where I would DJ and I would get hyper. I don't do drugs and I don't drink anymore, and I haven't since I was, like 19 or 20, and I'm in my late 40s right now. But I would get hyper and so excited about doing music that I'd get people jumping and dancing and bouncing, and the second you put on a slightly not perfect record, everybody came off that high, and like they had to walk away. It's like, I got to get off the dance floor. I'm tired, and I thought, well, what the fuck did I do? I'm a bad DJ. I just ruined the whole night and just ruined the whole party. I'll have to work again to get this dance floor back just when I had it.
Now, where do you think the shifts came from? Like back in, let's say, Larry Levan's day, he would play very diverse music, as far as he would play the B-52s, Mesopotamia, into Grace Jones.
Enjoyed good. See, he wasn't a DJ worrying about the floor. A lot of that has to do with egotism and what I call divaism. Larry played obviously for the club what was good, but he also played what he liked. A lot of DJs are only worried about what the crowd's going to like, and they put on crowd pleaser records or things that they think suit the club or the environment. Like if I went into the Paradise Garage, I not knowing its history, but knowing that it's a big house club, I would have. The average person would only play deep, soulful house music. I'd throw on, I got a great mix of Prodigy doing Firestarter, you know what I mean? And if the energy was right and I was peaking a kind of thing, I'd definitely slam it on. I'd slam on, some crazy Bonnie Tyler remix record just to fuck people's minds up, But you could do that once, it depends on your reputation too. I have a friend of mine who said I have a rock and roll, edgy sensibility, but I'm playing. He's a rock guy. He calls it disco music, So it's kind of like, I could play smooth stuff, and then I could just bang in the freakiest fucking record. But people that know my stuff kind of go, oh, he's doing one of his trips. That's cool. And I love to surprise people. You're going along and the music's good, and what the hell is this? And you look at the DJ booth, and I'm laughing, and they're going, is he serious, or did he just did he not take his medicine today or something? You know what I mean? And then it's kind of like the whole room catches fire. It's like, oh, cool, this is cool. Hey, this guy's got a sense of humor, or this guy's got is able to take a chance. Larry did that. Larry Levan did that. He wasn't afraid to throw on music like that, and that just comes from being a music connoisseur.
Now, do you think that people were more
playing good records? If you want to play really good music and you're stuck only in a single genre, you're going to run out of options. Any genre has their top 20, top 50 great records, or top 10 great records. If you want to play good music all night long, you're going to run out of stuff. If you only play go or trance, there's only so many records. Or you're going to play house music, you're going to play hip hop, you're going to play classics, you're going to play current stuff. There's not that many great records if you want to play great music. So you have to switch genres. It's how you do it, and with what kind of artistry and what kind of skill and what kind of taste. A DJ has to have good taste, and that's just something you get from either you're born with good taste or you're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you tastefully make your transitions, and if you can't break people's ankles from going from one to another. I do that as a shock thing, but you can't repetitively doing. I can go from 130 beats a minute down to 105, but as I do that, I'll hit the stop on the CD player and I'll let the record spin down, and then bang, I'll hit a hip hop record and do a half-hour set of that. So you're right there in the genre, but it's the taste in the savoir-faire of how you do it that makes it work.
Now, do you think people then were more open-minded, or do you think that people were accepting the different genres because it was Larry?
Less so. less so. You went to a club and you listened to disco music. If you put on a Talking Heads record and your crowd didn't love you as a DJ, I've heard DJs get booed. Literally get booed.
Wow.
Now there's too much variation in music. When you listen to any radio station, there's such a blend of music. You'll hear pop, you'll hear dance, you'll hear hip hop, all on the same station. You know what I mean? And if something's even good and quirky enough, some jazz funk fusion thing, but it's really cool, they may even throw that at you too. And people are accepting of it. Way more accepting now. I mean, there are times that people just walk out of off the dance floor, and sometimes walk out of the club too. Just because I'm talking about.
They're not feeling the DJ.
That DJ sucked. He didn't play vocal house music all night long. And what was that bullshit that he threw on? And it was phones would light up and, bitches would start yakking. I couldn't believe that the DJ,
Now, was Larry like one of the ones that did the cross-genre thing, or was that more popular? Were a lot of jocks doing that? No,
a lot of jocks weren't doing that because they were limited by the style of where they played. If you went to Studio 54, it was fun party records like Chic, Le Freak, and all that kind of stuff. You didn't put on dark music. You may play Rolling Stones,
Miss You, yeah.
Yeah, Miss You, or something like that, or Queen doing another one, Bites the Dust, or something. But that was a hard stretch.
So you wouldn't hear Psycho Killer?
Well, so you wouldn't hear Psycho Killer. No, you wouldn't. Then if you went down to Danceteria, you would hear Psycho Killer and Television and Runaways, and maybe they would, in the opposite direction, stretch to put Blondie's Heart of Glass. Or maybe a Kraftwerk record, because, it was kind of sounded cool, and it kind of had a feel to it, but it had an edge, so it fit in with the genre. You wouldn't, maybe Donna Summer's I Feel Love, but you would get a couple of long faces. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I'm not into disco, I'm into new wave, You didn't have dance remixes of, Take On Me or something like that. It didn't happen until later.
So
like Disconet, pioneered that kind of stuff.
So the punk clubs would play hip-hop, definitely. Would they also play, deep dub, like reggae stuff, roots?
Wasn't around in a punk club. Reggae, if you played, you would do ska. Stray Cats would be reggae. That's maybe it. You wouldn't have that. That was oh no, that's black music, and that's that's those people. Or the disco. That's those disco people, or those those punk people, or those rock and roller heads. You know what I mean? It was very segregated. Very segregated. I don't mean racially, I mean musically. Of course it fell into racial divides because, black people listen to soul and white people listen to rock and roll. But Larry was trusted by the people who came to see him, which is largely a black crowd. But he never played, he may play a Devo record as a goof, but, Larry's sense about what he played always had a bit of soul, a bit of funk, and worked with the other records within the last few minutes and the next few minutes of what he's playing.
Yeah, he was big into like the Eron's Land of Hunger kind of thing, and.
Well, there's three kind of DJs. There's the classic style DJ, or somebody who have a genre and like house, and just that's what they're known for. You have Frankie Knuckles, he'll do Chicago house, and that's his trip. When you go see Frankie Knuckles, that's what it is. There's a couple of other DJs that can be very variant, and then there's the bar club DJ, which I jokingly call drag queen DJing. It's party records. You'll play a record, it'll end, and then you'll start another record at a completely different BPM. Before there was DJing and mixing, in the 50s and the 60s, if you know your DJ history, those were party records. You would put on a record, and the record would end, and then you didn't have two turntables. Either the automatic thing would drop a new disc down, and the mechanical arm would go over and start playing the record jukebox style. Or if you were DJ with two turntables and a little left and right switch or fader, you couldn't blend. That didn't happen until later on, until the disco stuff. So, there are those kind of DJs that play party music for small venues. You have a bar, you have a club. There's 100 people in the place. It's not really a dance venue, and that's a different kind of DJing. It's an entertainment kind of DJing. You want to keep the mood light. You want to have some fun. You want people to kind of tap their feet, maybe sing along a little bit, or they're talking to their friends and they notice the music in the background.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it depends on what kind of DJing. There's different styles.
What kind of current artists are you into? That's a good question. There's not a lot. I like remix people like Merck. I like freestylers, freestylers, yeah.
Freemasons, that kind of stuff for the Euro. I like. I have a pretty big open ear, and when I download stuff, I throw them on MP3 CDs. I convert them from MP3 to audio CDs,
right,
stuff like that. So I don't even look anymore. If the track is good, I mark it with a little check next to it, and I'll throw it on. Do I have any one particular artist that I'm crazy over? No, not particularly.
Whatever sounds good.
All over the place. I mean, I listen to everything from Underworld, a while back, and like I said, commercial dance music to. I listen to Steve Reich, which is like Philip Glass kind of music. I listen to ambient stuff. I could put on an old Tangerine Dream record, you know what I mean?
Right.
Rubicon or something like that, and just chill out. That's my old drug days, Tonto's Expanding Headband, if you want to get really esoteric. Or I could sit down and listen to Dreamweaver and Dark Side of the Moon, or I could put on Gary Glitter's I Love Rock and Roll and B-52s. So I got a really large range. I'm not a DJ that constantly saturates myself with music, because what happens, you begin to lose your sensitivity. Nothing doesn't mean anything anymore. So when I'm home, I'll listen to quieter stuff. And then when I go out, I want to get excited just like you do or the next person does. So I will, I'm a little less jaded I want to get hyped up and excited too while I'm DJing, just like the crowd that's paying to come in. So if I'm listening to hyper music and banging stuff all the time in my head, then it doesn't mean anything to me anymore, and I probably won't make good decisions.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Here's a question that people ask a lot these days. How do you feel about the state of current mainstream hip hop?
I'm not super in tune with it. I like mainstream as far as stuff like, Missy Elliott and that kind of stuff.
50 Cent and that kind of thing.
Well, there's many different levels. There's social level. You got to realize, when I came out doing music, hip-hop was rapper's delight. You know what I mean? And actually, hip-hop was my music, freestyle, which it's called now, the street records, Walking on Sunshine and Hip Hop Bebop and Planet Rock, that was called hip hop, and rap was rapper's delight and all that kind of stuff. I went into the dance genre, so I never heavily followed along the lines of hip hop stuff. Missy Elliott's productions I absolutely love. It's kind of a kickback to the old day when people got really creative, took wacky chances. You listen to her mixes, it's just, and her videos back it up. It's just off-the-wall shit, which is wonderful, creative stuff,
She's definitely a throwback artist, no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. And I love it, not just because I'm old, but legendary.
Legendary, yeah.
Not because I'm just legendary, but because it takes chances. There are some great records that, there's some weird loop just cycling, in the background or something like that, and it's great because it's done creatively, but just if you're running a drum machine and you're whining like a little bitch because, somebody slapped you in the face when you were a kid and, your mother smokes crack, then give me a break. 14 years old, I was out in the street, and I had to defend for myself. You know what I mean? And I lived a very rough lifestyle, but I have no sympathy. You know what I mean? But just if you have the strength and the brains and the guts to put together a record, then you have the strength, the brains, and the guts to lift yourself above it. So if music is good, I love it. If it's just somebody bitching and complaining, I don't care. Tell it to the judge. Get off the cross. Someone else needs the wood.
The current hip hop to me seems to be very formulated and very just not genuine,
Well, that's exactly what I mean, I guess you just said it in. I mean, I didn't want to put it like that because I would sound like it had no basis behind it. But if it's coming from somebody's heart and soul, and there's really some substance to it, it's going to be good. One of the things we used to talk about in writing a record is, let's write a hit record. First of all, you can't write a hit record. But what I tell people, if we were doing a dance track with a vocalist and verse, chorus, lyrics, that kind of format, I would always tell whoever's writing the music, it's critical that you write from your heart. You can't do, I have a gun and, I'm going to shoot your son and let's go have some fun because it rhymes with run.
Hey, that's good. Say that again slower. Let me write that down. Go ahead. That's very good. I'm going to sell that to Fitty.
Right. But if you write something about, human, you want to write a hit record, write about the human experience, write about something that has really affected you, write about how you feel about something. If you go back and you look at the lyrics of a lot of records, it's somebody's statement on something. That's why hip-hop in the beginning was very good, because, not that it's not now, but it was talking about urban repression. It was from people's heart of, I'm a black man, I'm in ghetto, or, I'm repressed, or that kind of stuff. It's hard to sing about being repressed when you have a rented, a rented Rolls Royce and a rented house with rented girls in your video with your bling on, and you're talking about, how,
the man
keeps you down. Well, the man's buying your records, you fool. F-O-O, you fool. And, he's probably making the money off of your record sales,
All day, yeah.
How dumb is that? And he's probably a white Jewish guy who runs the record label. So who's the fool?
That's a shocking revelation.
Well, there you go. I've been with the best of them. I was with, what's his name, from Buddha Records and Dice Records, Morris Levy. I dealt with all the Sharks and all the sleazeballs. Henry Stone, who had TK Records, and then Hot Productions down in Miami, and been there, knew all the sleazeballs, all of them, man.
Shysters, if you will.
Yeah, shysters, scumbags. Hey, they kept the record industry going. I hate to say it. They signed, Henry Stone signed Casey and the Sunshine Band, and they robbed them blind. Anita Ward, Ring My Bell, all those bands classics.
Yeah, I saw this thing on VH1 when Disco Ruled the World. They interviewed Henry Stone, and they were basically pointing to George McRae's Rock Your Baby as starting the disco movement. That one record.
Around then, yeah. Rock Your Baby, yeah. I'll Always Love My Mama, Rock the Boat, Manu Dibango, Sol Makosa. Yeah.
That was a very good documentary. If you get a chance to see that, it's very good.
Yeah. I've seen pieces of it.
They interview Mancuso and all those cats.
Wow.
Very cool.
Wow.
What's your favorite movie? You had one.
Wow.
If you could only have one.
Wow. Let me go look at my movie collection.
All-purpose movie.
I'm old school, like Blade Runner. I love sci-fi. I love fantasy. I love stuff like Blade Runner and Fifth Element and that kind of stuff as lighthearted things. I watch movies for different reasons, and a lot of people watch movies. A lot of people watch movies because they want the story, and they want this, they want to be taken on a trip. When movies like Blade Runner came out, I suddenly got seriously interested in special effects, not as just eye candy, but the technology behind them that makes them happen. I always kept looking at the screen going, how did they do that? I want to know how they do that. And I would get movie effects magazine or special effects magazine, and they would have, this new process called blue screen, and how they made those what do you call it? How they made those TIE fighters fly in Star Wars. I like Star Wars not because I was into the Force and a geek, a geek like that. I wanted to know how they put that together. I deal with computers. Can I buy a piece of software and can I make that myself? That was my big motivation for those movies. So I tend to still love sci-fi movies and special effects movies. Now it's kind of like, whatever. Now it's kind of eye candy, but
CGI,
stuff was original. This last Star Wars that came out, the quality of the special effects, and I just saw it in HD and stuff. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. The line between reality and special effects is blurred.
It's almost gone.
Done right, you could tell incredible stories. As a producer, you tell a story. As a DJ, you tell a story. You tell a musical story. You weave sound. You weave feelings. As a producer, you use sound and you create a story based around lyrics and words. And in film or video, you create a visual story. So I like movies that have great special effects. And I'll go to things and people go, "Oh, what a piece of shit that was," And I go, "Yeah, but did you see how they, digitized that, when they were flying over that city, it took, 42 people to create that three-dimensional model that lasted for 10 seconds in that scene?" And they're like, "Huh?" And I'm like, "But look at that."
You missed it.
Yeah. So I like sci-fi stuff like that. Good Japanimation, Akira and
anime,
that kind of stuff. I like a good real story, like I'll watch Last Samurai or something like that to really iRobot, which I love for special effects.
Were you into the Kill Bill series, like 1 and 2?
Yeah. I actually 2 really freaked me out when she was put in the buried alive and had to scratch her way out. It kind of freaked me out. I'm an armchair Buddhist and have taken those classes and stuff like that. So I can't, and I know it's only a movie. I can't watch Death and Destruction. I can't watch Faces of Death 2 and 3 and stuff like that.
No, too much, yeah.
It freaks me out. Human suffering wigs me out. I've been there. You know what I mean?
Too much of it on the news, yeah.
No, the news stuff does. I could watch The Operation where they take a chisel and they, crack somebody's, head open. I may have to just look away until they open the brain, but once they do, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Look at the brain. It's a wonderful thing. It's, it's breathing and moving, and it's a miracle of nature. But could I sit there and watch somebody in an electric chair? You know what I mean? My mind goes into, well, what is that person feeling right now? Did they go instantly numb, or, did all their muscles freeze and they're suffocating, or are they just frying in intense pain? My brain goes there. So
very analytical, yeah.
Yeah, I can get analytical with those sort of things. Yeah, and it fucks me up. So. What am I watching? I'm not watching a movie anymore. I paid to suffer. I can't even watch the Animal Planet when they have animal rescues. It drives me crazy. I can't stand to see that life can get to those levels that are so bad and suffering,
People are wacky sometimes with how they treat us.
And on the other side, I deal with drag queens every weekend. And freaks and drunks and, and crazy people in clubs. So.
But they don't mistreat their animals.
Oh, yeah, they mistreat their DJ sometimes, which is sometimes on the same level. With that jaws grinding together, coming into the DJ booth going, let me look through your book. I got some good ideas for the next song you could play, and you turn around and they've taken all your records or CDs and spread them out all over the counter because they're trying to figure out what what you should be playing next.
Play something with a beat.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't get that. I will sometimes and rarely I'll get, are you going to play this shit all night long? You know, if I'll do hip-hop or I'll do a classic thing or something like that. And I'll do one or two things. Either I'll lean over and give him 25 cents and say, I think there's a jukebox next door here, water. Or I'll put on a long, I'll say, hold on a second, I'll put on a long record. I'll walk into the door and I'll say, how much did you pay to get in? And they'll say $10. And I'll say, can you give me this $10 back? Give me the $10. And it's the person say, here's your money back. You're welcome to stay, but now that you got in for free, shut the fuck up.
What do you want for free?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the worst job you ever had?
In general?
Yeah.
I haven't had too many 9-to-5 kind of jobs. I worked at Sam Goody, which is pretty awful. I hated doing that. And I was stealing more than I was selling.
Hey, Sam might be listening.
What's that?
Sam might be listening.
Hey, Sam still owes me a paycheck, so I think we're even. In the 70s, I left home with 14. I had to find a job. I worked at CBS in the mailroom. And they would give me test pressings and acetate and say, take this upstairs. It's a test pressing. The A&R department has to approve this. This is emergency. This has to be released tomorrow. And I would always come with a backpack, a big bag kind of thing, a shoulder bag. And I'd go take the fucking record and put it in my bag and take it home and listen to it. They'd say, we gave you a record yesterday and you're supposed to deliver it up on the the 14th floor. Well, you'd usually leave it at a reception counter, or you'd leave it, at somebody's outside on their receptionist desk. And of course I did. I left it on the desk. She was busy and on the phone, and I just put it down because that's what you did when you worked in the mailroom. You didn't disturb people. You just kind of put their mail down on the desk and moved on. You didn't get into intimate conversations. So that was pretty bad. I mean, it was cool because I got, vinyl for free.
Well, I definitely have to ask you this question because people listening to this are going to want me to. What happened to those records?
Oh, they were awful. I mean, it's the same thing that happened to Columbia Records. They're all bad choices put them out of business. If you weren't Barbra Streisand or Bruce Springsteen, they signed so many artists and basically ignored them or didn't care what they were signing at a point.
No gems, huh?
Well, I mean, record labels had two models. Either they didn't put something out unless they thought it was amazing, or they made, $50 million from Barbra Streisand, so they can give 50 people $1 million, or 100 people, $500,000, or 1,000 people. You can keep splitting the math for advances. You know what I mean? And hopefully one of those will stick to the wall. And I think that's what some of those big labels like Columbia did, is they had a little bit of cash, and they didn't really care A&R wise. Well, they had some things that like you had to be an artist who was album worthy because that's what sold, and you had to be a songwriter because we really appreciated you. But if you were a hillbilly with a banjo singing about your dog, they'd sign you. And then the moment you didn't sell records, they would abandon you promotional-wise. The thing I love about Europe is you can have a hit record and then have 3 or 4 failures, and on your 5th record, you're still considered an artist and people love you. Here, if you have you have 5 hit records, your 6th and maybe 7th hit record sucks, your career is over.
You're finished, yeah.
Yeah, I can get off the plane in England, which we did for the Queen's Jubilee a couple of years ago, and a friend of mine who does hip-hop records, Kid Ralph Dog over there, called up the BBC and Kiss FM and Sky Radio, and I mean, within 24 hours he had 7 interviews on major national things, and I was spinning, I did a live DJ set, and I haven't had a record out in the UK in 15 years.
I mean, that goes back to what I personally feel. Many people disagree, but I definitely feel this. People in Europe and overseas have a much deeper appreciation for music, period.
You're an artist. You're not a product. I mean, you are a product. In reality, you're a product. But I know that name, I know that person, I associate them with being creative, and there's a little bit of respect there for it. Not that people don't respect here, but here you're a celebrity and a pop icon and then an artist. There you're an artist that happens to be a celebrity, because a lot of people buy their records, and maybe even a pop icon if they're big enough. There isn't a drive. I mean, there is now. But back then, there wasn't a big drive to be a superstar pop icon. It was nice because, you had Beatles, Rolling Stones, and later on, Prince, Madonna, blah, 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 go down the list. But those are sort of things that kind of happened. You didn't buy your way into it. You didn't strive it into it, and you didn't produce and guide your videos into it. If you were a big success, it's because you earned it, not because you bought it or not because you styled it. I mean, I see groups that come on the scene, and after their first album, they're playing Madison Square Garden. And I know that they aren't selling enough records to fill Madison Square Garden, but somebody made an investment and put all that money and rented the garden, you know what I mean, and paid off, whoever to run their video and to have their stuff in heavy rotation.
Clear Channel presents,
Oh, please. Don't even start. And then that's why I love internet radio and all that kind of stuff. Not that a lot of the radio stations are bad. They're scrambling. They're satellite radio. I have Sirius, and I'm trying to talk to them and XM about doing a little thing like you're doing right now. I want to find cool people, interview them, and throw it on satellite radio. But you can buy your way to stardom these days. You have a good stylist and a good management team and a couple of good lawyers and a lot of money behind you. The visual. You're going to move, yeah. You're going to get a personal trainer. You're going to drop 30 pounds. You're going to get that cool haircut, and then, a couple of good designers are going to hook you up with top-notch clothing, and you've been carefully placed at a couple of high-end industry and non-industry, events and award shows, and you walk in glistering, and you walk in with your entourage, whoa, who is that person?
And when all that fails, start throwing your ass around.
Yeah, well, to a point, yeah. I mean, but, the higher you go, the harder you fall. You have a break. Everybody has a pinnacle in their career where you hit the wall. You're a human being. I had it on a very small scale. I mean, you got Mariah Carey, you have David Chappelle, you have people that everybody hits the wall. Madonna, everybody hits the wall. It's how you come out of it and how you handle it. You're a regular guy. You're a regular girl. You're hanging out. You have friends. You get into the music business, and you got something there, and all of a sudden you're in this whirlwind. I had a hit record, and I was producing a demo for this girl, and people from Electra are going to come down and hear it. We went to the Hit Factory in New York, and she's behind the glass out in the studio room playing piano, and I'm just kind of. They said, she said, "Can you come along and just make sure the levels are okay? I know you're recording, and you're a producer, recording engineer, and I just want you to. I just feel good if I know that you're on the other side of the glass looking out for me, like my voice wasn't too bassy or whatever. Okay, sure. You're my friend. I love you." This girl Sandy. In walks her manager, which is David Bowie's manager, and the president of Electra Records and his son, who's the head of dance. And, I'd never met any of these people, but I had my record out, and Tony DeFries says, this is Malton Parrish, and this is so-so, and Sandy Dillon is behind the glass. And you go, Man Parrish, the Man Parrish, you got the record out, blah, 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 blah. And this guy, Tony DeFries, leans over to me and says, you have a record out, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, is it doing well? I said, well, yeah, it's number one a couple places, and it's doing really good right now. He goes, look, I can get you a record deal. In the meantime, this girl is singing her heart out behind the glass, trying to sell her album to Electra Records. The lights are dimmed in the control room, so it's a mirror on her side, and the sound is almost off. Nobody's listening to what she's doing. There's this little thing going on about, you're the Man Parrish, I can get you a record deal. He pulls me out into the hallway and says, look, do you want me to speak on your behalf? We'll be business partners, 50-50. 50-50, right? I never knew anything about anything. I did the 50-50, sure. That's what managers get, right? Next thing I know, 2 days later, I'm getting a record deal. They're in talks about me getting a record deal from Electra Records. I got a $125,000 singles deal, unheard of back in those days. Produced 1 or 2 single records. He managed David Bowie. I'm going up to his. A part of the deal is that she had to get a deal too. If they wanted me that bad, then this poor girl, which she never found out about until later, is like she got a deal too. And he told her, well, you're both getting deals. Isn't this wonderful? I'm such a great manager. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy's really cool. And I'm going up to Central Park South to his home/office. His bedroom looks out over the park. I mean, down 7th Avenue, out over Times Square. And his living room looks over Central Park. And I'm going, this guy knows what he's doing. I hit the big time. He's got David Bowie. He's got Mott the Hoople. He's got, Mick Ronson, all my childhood idols, you know what I mean? And here I am. He said, Manny, this electronic dance music is never going to take effect. He said, you have to have a rock band and slide across the stage and lick the guitar. We'll get you guitar lessons, but for now, we're going to get you singing lessons, and you're going to become the next David Bowie. And I said, okay, well, I got to deliver a record to Electra, right? He goes, yeah, we'll do a rock record. He said, well, I do dance music. He says, well, how about a rock dance record that Michael Cimbello has Maniac? We'll just steal the whole idea of that song, and you'll have an instant hit record. Which I did. A song called We've Got the Power, okay? It was hideous. Hideous. I rented a portable mobile recording truck. It sat in my driveway in Brooklyn, and for a month, I recorded a piece of shit. We turned it into the record label, and I was miserable. It's not what I wanted to do. I did what I was told. We turned it into the record label, and they freaked out. What is this? Well, Manny's not going to compromise his music style just because you, the record label, feels differently. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. Yes, I will compromise my music style. I want to do what I want to do. I'll kiss your ass. Give me a chance. And the whole thing fell apart like really fast. I went to $125,000, and none of it went to me. I got monthly statements, $30,000 for the limousine in first class, ticket from Switzerland. And I said, never went to Switzerland. She goes, no, Tony owns his home in Switzerland, and he had to fly into America to speak on your behalf. And of course, he had to take them out to dinner, and the limo, ran with the engine running outside, for 7 hours, and that was a $7,000 bill here and a $5,000 bill there, and we had to call the record company on your behalf, so you paid for the phone bill this month.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, that's what happens.
So nothing was ever even promoted, released by Electra, nothing, huh?
Nothing, and his son, who got us signed, Mitchell Krasnow, who's head of dance, got blacklisted, and shipped off to England, where he couldn't do any more harm, as an A&R person over there. It was a disaster.
So that Michael Cimbello ripoff was never even heard, was it?
I don't even know if I have it on cassette tape anymore. If I do, I should try to digitize it and put it up on my website. I have my closet with some of my masters in there, and the oxide is falling off the tape. They haven't been touched in 20 years. I'd have to go have them baked.
Now, were you singing on the record?
My friend Michael was singing on the record. I'm not a singer. I never pretended to be, and anything that I've ever done, I've either used vocoder when I open my mouth, or I've had other people sing for me. So I can't sing. I was taking singing lessons at the time because I was going to be the new
Bowie
hit of the. Yeah, exactly. But I'm a producer. I'm a songwriter. I don't sit down and take a guitar and figure out chord progressions and I'm not a poet where I take lyrics and mold it into music and then go to the next step where I take that simple guitar or piano melody and then turn it into a wonderfully produced record. My talent is at sound, and it always has been.
It's all about the track, yeah.
Yeah, I was doing soundscapes and ambient stuff before it was called ambient because I wasn't a good musician. but I was good at dialing up interesting synth sounds and smoking weed and tripping on it. And that kind of turned into being a record producer, and I kind of found this depth I can go into. I can grab a feeling, and this sound kind of doesn't really feel the way I'm feeling, but this kind of does. Well, how about if I take it and I do this to it? Well, it'll really accentuate this kind of mood that I'm in or feeling. So that's a producer, whether it's up and fun, or I always try to throw a little twist in it and make it a little bit, I don't know if it's dark, a little bit more cerebral, you know what I mean? So, the stuff I was doing back then, I was forced into doing music that wasn't even what I was doing. I was just, let's see, he has a guitar, we have to have a guitar. His guitar is doing, chunka chunka chunk, and you go unka chunka chunk. So it's the same, but not the same, And I was a parrot. I was just doing what I thought I should do to become somebody instead of following what was in me. Which gets back to what I was talking about writing songs. If you're not following your gut, if you're not DJing from your insides, then you suck. Whether you like it or not, I think people could tell the difference that they're being lied to. Not directly, but indirectly. I don't mean lied, I mean genuine. If you're a genuine person, not a genuine person, but if you're a genuine artist and you're doing something that's artistic and creative and you're digging down deep in your soul and you're putting that into your music, you're putting that into your DJing, Larry Levan did that, that's why you're successful. People sense creativity, they artistic genius. They sniff that. You know what I mean?
Now,
Andy Warhol was crackers, but he had this artistic genius in it, and people knew it.
Can you paint? Can you draw?
I can do some painting and drawing. I have some drawing stuff up in my house. My graphics tend to be video or Photoshoppy kind of things. So I'm painting and drawing, but I'm using my first love, which is a computer. So am I taking I don't do vinyl or pen and paper. I do CD and Photoshop and Final Cut Pro. So, yeah, it's the same thing. It's just, a different
method,
generation to the side. You know what I mean? It's a different, generation of doing the same thing.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, I'm a cheeseaholic. I love, good, strong. I don't mean like blue cheese. I like blue cheese, but I love cheese. Unfortunately, I love cheese and breads, and I can't eat that stuff anymore because I become instantly fat pig. Bagels with cream cheese. Oh man, I can fucking live on that 24/7, and I do. And I'm at the age where my body doesn't handle it, and I gain billions of pounds just by looking at it. I'll eat a 6-ounce bagel and gain 20 pounds in weight.
So you're a cheese and bread man, so I guess that naturally leads you to pizza.
Absolutely. And I've had pizza all over the world. Ain't nothing like New York pizza or Chicago pizza. It has to do with the water. There was a guy that was making pizza and bagels out in California and was literally had water trucks drive across the U.S. from New York to California to get the same taste.
Really?
It has to do with the pH of the water, whether there's a lot of, what's that called, sulfur in the water, which a lot of places have, a lot of minerals.
Florida, yeah.
Yeah, it makes a big difference in how the pizza tastes, how the bread dough rises. So I say, come on, it's some fucking dough, dough, water, tomato sauce and cheese. Why does this taste awful? It tastes awful because it's not made right. I can't stand pizza. I mean, it's fun as junk food, but you do Pizza Hut here and you do Pizza Hut somewhere else, and I hate to say it, but the Pizza Hut tastes better here because it's made with different kind of water.
Being in Brooklyn, you definitely live in the right town for pizza.
Oh, hell yeah, or going to Manhattan, go down. There's two kinds of pizzas. Good dish I love, and I like, gourmet pizza where it's super thin crust with a white white sauce and a little pesto and cheese, and it's like eating a Ritz cracker with some tomato sauce on it. I love that kind of stuff too. But give me greasy 42nd Street, or 14th Street, right next to what's that hot dog place? Gray's Papaya, and they also have pizza. That shit's good, man. It's thin crust, it's greasy, and it's wonderful. I love that crap, but I have to be careful with it. And on the other side, I did the whole macrobiotic trip. I did, I used to make my own bread and grind my own wheat, and I've been through all that kind of, make my own yogurt and do all that kind of stuff too. So
phases here and there, I guess.
Oh yeah, I'll spend $10 for a good block of cheese that I love, and then I'll buy fucking Cheese Whiz in a can and be as happy as a pig in shit. Which and I'm looking at it, it says all natural cheese product.
Hey, it's all natural.
Snacking, you know what I mean? Yeah, but I'll put it on a whole wheat cracker, which kind of neurotically makes it okay.
Yeah, give me a Big Mac and a Diet Coke.
Yeah, well, I love that, but I can't digest that stuff anymore. It's just I have heartburn for 2 days. So
does that have anything to do with the legendary thing?
When you become legendary, you also become lactose intolerant, you become gassy, you become overweight, you become blind. The moment you hit your 40s, you're like, why can't I can't read the bottom of that fucking label. Oh, I'm probably just tired, you know what I mean? Let me buy those drugstore reading glasses, you know what I mean? And I really don't need them, and I'm going to turn the other way and hide my head under my coat and just read the label and then put it back on the shelf so that we can see how, but when you hit your 40s and, in the mid-40s, your eyes start going, your knees hurt a little bit, your back's kind of like, it's a little harder to get out of bed in the morning. But, fuck them. If I'm in a wheelchair, I'm going to be like, what's his name? Stephen Hawkins, but I'm going to have a way better voice synthesizer. I'm going to have a cool vocoder sound, you know what I mean? And I'll probably have a little 808 drum beat every time I speak in the background too, you know what I mean? Especially if it's labored breathing, like what's his name? Like Superman, Christopher Reeves had to stop and take a gasp of air and then let it out again. I'll just make sure that my drum machine is timed so I'm talking in rhythm,
On the inhale, you could do some 808s.
Yeah, or I could put it through one of those beat scramblers where it reverses it, so I could say hello, and on the inhale it goes, and I could lay it in the background under a beat, and put a traveling filter on it. So, I think fun, man.
I think you could license that to Apple tomorrow.
I probably could. I love Apple, man. I love where they're going with their stuff. I've been an Apple geek way before the Macintosh. I had an Apple IIc, and I had a graphics tablet and a simple vector 3D program, and you could use stick figures and make like a house and kind of fly through it. Pong games, that kind of resolution. I have a Radio Shack TRS-80, one of the original home computers with a voice synthesizer, which was very rare. I come from pre-MIDI. I learned synthesis on a ARP 2500, which is about, the size of an upright player piano. I mean, they were like 6 feet long and, 4 feet high. I still have my ARP 2600. I have some old Moog modules. Some of my collective gear. I have one of the original sequencers that were used by Giorgio Moroder for Donna Summer's I Feel Love.
Wow.
That's a MC8 microcomposer. And in those days, you didn't sit and play the stuff into the sequencer. You had a calculator and a pad next to you, and you would type in the numeric value of a key. So high C was like 127, low C was 0. So if you want to do middle C, E, and A, you'd have to do 41, 43, 45, whatever the number values were. And then you'd have to go back and put in a step. This is a 16th note, which of course didn't mean 16, which meant 12. You had 24 steps in a measure. So if you entered 22 and you were 4 measures down the line and everything started slipping a couple of notes out, you'd have to go back and erase everything out of the memory, the notes and the steps, and find out where you made the mistake and go forward from there. This whole thing was plugged in, and I had a dog that was wild, and he would come up to me and trip up. I mean, I'd spend 4 hours programming a bass line. The dog would trip over it, and it was all gone. Pull the plug out accidentally. And that stuff was backed up to cassette tape, by the way. This is before hard drives and floppy drives. You would plug in a Radio Shack cassette recorder, and it would save 12K, 16K of data on almost a whole side of a cassette tape.
And they expected you to do all this fractions and math while you were high.
I wasn't high. No, you get high afterwards. You would spend the whole day programming it, and you would have a bass line that ran for a minute and a half, and maybe a counter sequencer line, and you just put it in a loop and light up a joint and sit there and go, cool. I spent 12 hours programming Donna Summer's da 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 da, and then I went into a transpose da 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 da, and then back to da 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 da, and you'd put the thing on loop, and that took 4 hours to program.
So that piece that you have actually came from Giorgio?
Yeah, it came from Suzanne Ciani, who bought it from somebody who got it from Giorgio Moroder. I have the EMS vocoder that was used by ELO for Mr. Blue Sky.
Wow.
What else do I have? I have 1 or 2 other little prize things sitting. I got to look at my little MIDI museum, my MIDI museum, I call it.
Did you intend on collecting gear, or just sort of happened?
No, I didn't want to throw it out because I like the sounds of certain things. I love my me and my Arptoni 600 sat there, and we've been through a lot together. You know what I mean? It's like an old keyboard or an old guitar that's like you can't throw it out. It's beat up, it doesn't work, but you love it because you've been through so much shit together. So I wound up collecting stuff like that, and I used to get a lot of wow factor. I would have when I lived in my loft. I had this little big room off the side, and people come over and hang out and whatever. And before my records were out, I had my my futon sofa couch and a couple of milk crates for the coffee table because I was too poor to have anything. But then I'd open this door to this room, and it looked like the inside of the fucking space shuttle. People are like, what? Oh shit! And then all of a sudden they spoke to you a lot differently and kind of respected you. You know what I mean?
They know where you put your money. Yeah.
Yeah. I never into coke, you know what I mean? I didn't spend money on coke, and I only smoked pot until I became paranoid, and I didn't like being paranoid, so I was, I wasn't a drug addict. I was, smoked a little weed here and there and couldn't handle it. So instead of buying cars or bling or anything like that, or even clothes, I bought gear, I got Keyboard Magazine, and there's a new thing called a sampler. Like, what's that? Oh, it'll take a 2-second recording and play it back at a full, beautiful 8-bit resolution, and it's $2,000.
Now, was that the emulator?
Yeah, I had one of the first emulators in the city. People would rent it from me all the time. It weighed... Let's see, it was about 5 feet long, was made of cast iron steel. It had a 5.5-inch floppy drive in it. It held 2-second samples. It was 12. I think that had 8 or 12-bit sampling, and you could put 2 samples on a keyboard. You plug a mic into it and load it with something live, or take a 2-second sample of a recording, and there was crude editing on it, nothing visual. You trigger the sample, and I don't even remember if the emulator had editing. I don't think it had editing. That happened later with my Mirage. What's his name? Herbie Hancock used it, rented it from me because he was on Good Morning America, one of those, Good Day New York, one of those shows, and returned it, and it never worked right. And they told me, well, my problem, not theirs, So I was like, fuck you.
Damn you, Herbie.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was Herbie or somebody who moved it around, fucked it up, but they weren't going to take responsibility. And then the Mirage came out, the Ensoniq Mirage, and that was 12-bit sampling.
Whoa.
You could hold sampled up to 30, I think 20 or 30 seconds of sampling, and it went to 3.5-inch floppies, and it had MIDI. It had that new Dan Fangled MIDI thing going on, and you were able to sync it.
You can kind of tell when the sampler came into play because everyone and their mother was like totally leaning on the button and just pressing it just to press it.
I mean, we would take vocal things and, like freeze A-E-I-O-U and all that kind of stuff. I think probably my emulator left in the studio. Oh, no, that was Fair. I think it might have been Fairlight. We were also kings of the Fairlight. It was this huge computer box, which was 3 feet wide and 4 feet long and a foot deep. And then there was a giant CPU screen, and then there was 88-key keyboard. So the whole thing took up a kitchen table, and that did 12-bit sampling. And it had something called Page R, which was amazing. It was a record page where you could we could trigger your samples. And that had the big Winchester drive and the large, 8-inch or 10-inch floppies, the giant oversized floppies that went into it. And that's what Art of Noise used, and that's why it had that sound. Sequencers back then had sounds. You had a Lindrum, which had a certain kind of sound. So did the 808. You had Mirage sequencer. You had Opcode sequencer for Mac. You had Fairlight. And each one had a different sound because they worked at different clock resolutions. So when you're listening to music and there's timing, some were tight, some were loose, some had a human feel, some sounded like the Art of Noise stuff out of a box. It's real tight and real mechanical, like Kraftwerk stuff. And people got their sounds depending on what sequences they use and what drum machines.
You're talking about the Art of Noise beatbox?
The Art of Noise beatbox, the Frankie Goes to Hollywood. What else did they do with that? What's her name? I can't remember her name. She's doing movie sound scores now. She did her, Trevor Horn, and this guy, I can't pronounce his last name, Selznick or something like that. They were the three people behind Art of Noise, and they did all the Trevor productions for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. And what else did they do? She's doing film scores, the Tom Jones thing and all that, a Kiss. It was all done on Fairlight. Yeah, you should go look it up online. It's got a great little history. There's, I think, the synthmuseum.com, and it's got some amazing stuff there. Sometimes you can hear samples. There was great equipment like the Mellotron, and what it was is a keyboard that had a tape recorder head attached to each key. So it was an octave and a half or two. There are 20, 30, 40 tape recorders back there, and there was this giant cassette, and it was like 4 feet high and 5 feet wide, and a foot thick. And if you wanted choir, you'd open the back and drop this giant thing in, and what it was 44 different tape loops on C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you know what I mean, of each note. So when you played strings, it would be not a digital but an analog loop of a tape loop. So if you push down C, that tape would start to spin, and you push down E and then G, then those two, and you would have a chord.
Wow.
And they're called Mellotrons. Rick Wakeman and Yes used to use it. It had that. You had choir and you had string were the popular ones. I think they had a couple of other cellos and a couple of other looping instruments. And they would hire a choir, and everybody would go as a choir, and then they would try to find the best loop by editing, not electronically, but by editing with tape to splice it together. And that would be the master, and then they would use 8-track tape. There's two kinds. There's regular cassette tape, and then there's an oilier kind of tape and 8 tracks. Because you could play them over and over again, and they wouldn't wear out. And these are the type of tapes they use in the Mellotron systems.
All the prehistoric equipment and methods. It's amazing that records were even never made.
Yeah. And then there were variations variations on vinyl. There was cheap vinyl, and then there was Europa Disc, who had the German Telefunk vinyl, which was thicker, and you couldn't put too much. What's that?
Direct plate metal mastering.
Yeah, metal masters, and you couldn't have a lot of bass on your records. People don't know, but some vinyl junkies may know. When we do dance music, and I'd be in the studio and I'd be cranking up the low end, and they'd say, "You better not do that, or too much high end. You're going to have problems in the mastering." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And a needle rides through grooves, and
it'll skip.
Yeah, it skips because if you ever seen a seismograph, it makes little wiggles. Well, the bigger the earth is shaking, or the bigger the bass sound, those wiggles start to touch the grooves on either side, and the needle will jump out of the record because it has nowhere to go. It hits like a little vortex. It hits a valley. It hits a
pulse.
Where the needle jumps off the record because the bass groove has gone too far to the left and right, touching the other groove. We used to use Herbie Pump Powers up at Master Disc. I can't remember. And he would be able to. We'd always go to the mastering. He'd be able to space out the grooves a little bit further, so we can get deeper bass onto our.
Really?
But you'd have less time.
Yeah.
I
learned that the hard way with the bass situation. I did the same thing, and I had to get a record recut. So I learned my lesson.
Well, a good mastering house will take it out and filter it. Now they could do it with all the digital stuff, but back then you had just a bass, mid, and high end, EQ. There's a great record that I have from M Factor, which did pop music, and there was two records cut onto the same side. They made the grooves super wide, and if you put the needle down, it was two spirals that ran together. I mean, you didn't see that, but if you put the needle down, it would play pop music. If you lifted the needle up and went over right to the very next groove, it would play a completely different song.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. De La Soul did the same thing with the B-side of Me, Myself, and I. They called it a three-sided record. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, they did it because pop music did it. It's just somebody figured out if you make the grooves wide enough, you can actually put a whole other record in there.
It's definitely that's hardly ever done. I asked the guy that used to cut my records, and he looked at me like I was crazy.
Well, I mean, people don't go to the record mastering because they charge you several $100s because you're this annoying, neurotic person who's like, I need my record to be perfect, and it's like the guy can't do his work. You know what I mean? Because there's somebody there yapping like yapping shit to him. You know what I mean? That's the only reason they charge, because they really don't want you there annoying them.
And they don't care about your record at the end of the day either.
But Herb used to love our stuff because it was just so out there.
Herbie Pump Powers, right?
Herbie Powers, yeah, Herbie Pump Powers. And then he used to write. If you have some of my old records, COD in the Bottle, I did Two Sisters, all that kind of stuff. Some of those Rama records, which is Raul and Manny. Two Sisters was me and Raul Rodriguez, and somebody said, "Oh, you're like fucking two sisters always hanging out together." And we got the name for that group. Let's just call it Two Sisters. You go get what's her name from the office, and I'll go call so-and-so, Beth, and we'll photograph them on the cover, and we'll use them as session singers, but there really won't be a group, you know what I mean? Because we just need to put out this record. But if you look on the center of it, one of the records with the man-to-man stuff, he used to be able to scratch stuff into the vinyl.
The runoff, yeah.
And he would write 12 black inches in a hole. This one's for your mama. So we would have all these cool, like between the label and the grooves there, we'd have all this like cool little shit that we would scratch into it. So the records would have all these little messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely recall that he wrote something to that effect on IOU.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't get that on the later, like the pressings that are out now. You wouldn't find it because they've been remastered and repressed. But
the original one, yeah.
Some original stuff. Then it was kind of cool. We had these secret, play it backwards and hear the devil. You know what I mean? You'd hear, look in the center for the message, and stuff like that.
Satanic verses and whatnot.
Yeah, whatever,
You've worked with a lot of different people. Are there any people that are like your favorites?
You still have your tape running?
Yeah.
Cool. Might have to do this in a two-part. Wow. Claus Nomi Nomi. I used to love working with Claus Nomi. We were part of the underground art movement back in the, it was 79, 80, whatever. It wasn't a free-for-all, but, you had an idea and people didn't think you were crazy, and, he wanted to dress up in a clear plastic raincoat and sing opera to rock and roll music, and it's like, cool. Let's make it work. A bunch of people got together and, and made it work. I had a lot of fun. I managed Village People for 6 years after they kind of fell from grace, but we put them back up together again. I went to Australia with them, and that was kind of like being in the Partridge Family. I felt like Shirley Partridge driving the bus. It was wacky, it was crazy, it was insane, it was a goof, and you're going, come on, can we bring in the Village People? And we're Sydney Stadium for the rugby halftime finals, going out to 12 million people worldwide. What's up? In Reykjavik, Iceland, okay? We played places. This little old lady came running up to the front of the stage, and she looked like Granny from the Playboy, the Playboy cartoons. She lifted her shirt and just showed her tits to all the guys and sat back down. And the guys were like, what? And I said, did I think you there? Of course, I went back into the little dressing room afterwards, and they're all yakking, and I said, guys, did I think I saw? Oh my God, can you believe what happened? So crazy, silly, stupid shit like that happened. Some of the more esoteric stuff, I did Gloria Gaynor, I Am What I Am. I programmed all the synth on that, and one of the first sessions I ever worked on was that.
Great record, too.
Yeah, I worked, I did a remix for Michael Jackson's Speed Demon. I think I still have the sample somewhere. I should actually check it out. His vocals a lot of his stuff came pre-mixed. They didn't give us just the raw tracks. A lot of the stuff was grouped into string, stereo strings, stereo keyboards, stereo this. The vocals were already mixed and compressed the way they wanted it.
Right.
And they wanted a street sound, since we had the street sound going, but he obviously hated what we did. So
was it ever released? Was it promo only?
Never released, and I don't know if I have in those days when we mastered, there was an in-between phase where we mastered to something called, I think it's called D1. You would use a video cassette and a digital encoder. It was a box that plugged into the mixer, and the other side of the box it had video output that went to a VCR, and it digitized all your stuff at the 16-bit resolution, and since there was a huge amount of data, it stored it on VHS tape. Actually beta tape, because it was a higher quality. So some of my mixes are in that format, and I have to find, I'm sure at $20 million a second transfer cost, there's some place that could probably transfer it for me. So I have to dig through my archives. If those VHSs are even good, they probably have to be baked. I don't know if a lot of people know what the baking is. I mentioned that once before. Tape has oxide on it, and the tape loses its oils, and that oxide, if you run it through a record head, the rust, because that's what tape is fancy rust, would basically just fall off the tape. So when they bake it, the plastic backing melts and it re-sticks to it. They bake it at a very, 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 very low temperature. I've heard people say that you could turn an oven on at, the very lowest temperature and put it up on the top shelf with the door open and let it sit there overnight, and your 20-year-old tapes will play again. And you probably get only one or two passes on it too. But
I've heard stories about tapes being destroyed during that process as well.
Yeah, you have to send them out to be professionally done. There's a professional way to do it too. Yeah, I had some Jimi Hendrix masters. A friend had a studio up in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and Jimi Hendrix, towards the very end of his career, booked it for like a month or two and tried to do an album, and you could hear him playing and then saying, this is all fucked up, stop, let's try this, and the tape was just running, and it's brilliant, peek behind the scenes of all this stuff. Somebody gave me those like 10, 15 years ago. I still may even have them in my vault, and I should go take a look, because that'd be great stuff. you know.
As long as his brother doesn't catch wind of it.
Well, yeah, really. I did a lot of remixes. I used to do stuff for, the company that put up my stuff, which is Import 12. Mike Wilkinson ran the place, and he was a very heavy audiophile. He did Disconet, the first DJ service.
Right.
So I would do some edits and help with that. In those days, it was all done with a razor blade and a splicing block. And if we knew a 12-inch long piece of stuff at 30 IPS, quarter-inch, was 1 beat, then we could take a ruler and we could slice it in half, and that was, a half note, and slice that in half would be quarter notes, and slice the 16th down to 32nd notes. So we used to, Raul Rodriguez, Animal Diaz, they used to do stutter edits by pasting together these and you'd get all these multi-edits like that. They were cut by razor by hand.
Yeah, the Animal was notorious for that.
Yeah, Animal was great. He was great. He was a crazy guy. I used to love him. Totally cool. Always smiling, always laughing, funny, always had jokes,
He was like Mr. Paco 92 KTU Super Mix guy,
Yeah. Well, we used to get our stuff on the, now that you mentioned KTU, we used to get my stuff on the radio. I had a vocoder, and I figured out how to really use the vocoder to make it kind of clear back in those days for what that technology was. Now, you could just speak into a microphone and it's clear, but it didn't have a lot of, vocoders weren't filters, like an equalizer. And if you have a cheap equalizer, it doesn't filter that much, and that's what the state-of-the-art of vocoders were in that day. Today, it has, hundreds of little filters, each, for 10 cycles, 20 cycles, 30 cycles, 40 cycles, all the way through the sound spectrum. But back then, a lot of the vocoders were very muffled sounding, so you get rock. In fact, Planet Rock, they couldn't get vocoder. They didn't have a vocoder, so they used a ring modulator to get that rock, Planet Rock, because the vocoders weren't clear enough. But to use a vocoder, you'd have to over-enunciate your words. So I had a vocoder, and I knew how to work it, and Carlos De Jesus, the program director from KTU, said, wouldn't it be great if we had a KTU robot? He was totally into Kraftwerk, totally into my shows. And I said, well, I can make you one. I said, what do you want? He goes, it'd be great if we got a station ID from you going, the hot one to KTU. And I'm like, okay, cool. And, you would have to go 92 KTU. And in the vocoder, it would come out as 92 KTU. You'd have to accentuate your voice when you're doing the vocoder. And it became a hit, and then he asked me for one for Paco and one for, him, and, so on and so on. And before you know it, I'm doing all these station IDs for free for KTU. Well, my record came out. All right, Carlos, you know what? I didn't charge you, put my stuff into rotation. So we used to get our stuff thrown on the air, and if it got, good feedback, it would go into heavy rotation. They'd come down and, I'd play the fun house. We'd bring reel-to-reel tapes for Jelly Bean to play. Madonna was sitting there with her black hair and a T-shirt that said, I'm Madonna, and she wasn't anybody yet. She was my opening act at Studio 54. I came down from the ceiling, and I'll never forget that experience, sitting on a tiny little swing. They pulled down one of the scrims, pulled me way up. I had a cape, like a Darth Vader kind of cape on, and which was shiny and slippery. And I'm sitting, and they lifted me up about 6 stories high way up into the proscenium arch. And the guy said, "Hi, I'm going to lift you today." And he was like 4 feet tall. And I said, dude, I'm like, 170 pounds, 180 pounds. He goes, oh, don't worry, we have counterweights. I'm only actually lifting about 10 pounds. I lowered Sylvester a couple of weeks ago, and that's when he was like in the 300s. And I was like, okay. And my mother had passed away that same day, so I went from the funeral to Studio 54. My brain was like not even there.
Wow.
So I'm holding onto this thing, and he said, while you're up there, don't swing back and forth because there's neon all around you. You'll shatter the neon, and there's something like 20,000 volts running through it, and you'll get electrocuted. So here I am in a shiny Darth Vader suit on a 2 foot wide, 2 foot long, 6 inch wide little swing that I'm going to be lowered down, onto the stage with, and I'm told not to move. So they get you up right after this record, and the DJ puts on another record, and the DJ puts on another record, and I'm up there for about 20 minutes.
No way.
And it's hot. because you're above all the lights, and I have makeup on, and it's burning my eyes, and I'm trying to take the corner of the hood that I'm wearing and trying to, like, get it out of my eyes. I can't see. I'm holding on for dear life, and all of a sudden the thing jerks and starts to drop. And it's like, did he drop me? Did he drop me? And all of a sudden, I have a blinding spotlight in my eye. My friend who was we had dry ice all the time, who was doing dry ice, used to drink a little bit. So he was supposed to put just a thin layer of dry ice on the stage, you know what I mean? So I could tell where the stage bottom was. Well, he had a couple of cocktails, and he put about 8 or 9 feet of dry ice on the stage. And this music would start in the beginning off of my first album. And Adrian and Joey Arias and this girl Kim and 2 kids had kind of like we were into Dark Crystal and all that kind of stuff, the movie, not the drug. The Dark Crystal. So they came out with lanterns, and they were supposed to be kind of like ankle high in the dry ice, and they were looking for a man Parrish, and I fly in from above, right? I was all into the theatrics kind of shit. Well, they were like, the fog was like 3 feet over their head, so you could see these, which actually turned out to be cool, these white lights glowing in the fog. They couldn't find the edge of the stage. One of them fell off and got back on again, but nobody knew it because they couldn't tell. And I'm being lowered down. There's a blinding light in my face, and I say, oh, well, there's the bottom of the stage. Well, it was about 12 feet off from where it was. So I go to step off the swing, and there's no stage. And this thing opens up like a parachute, and I go flying down into the dry ice, and of course it pushes all the dry ice away in the center, and everybody's screaming like, yeah, wow, fucking cool, wow, and there I am with a twisted ankle, which I didn't even know until I got off stage having to do a show, screaming off the microphone, stop the smoke machine, stop the smoke machine. So for the first, minute and a half of the first song, you really couldn't see much of anything because we were just singing in a cloud of smoke, It was bedlam. So Madonna was my opening act for that thing, but she went on later. She went on at 4 o'clock in the morning.
What is this, like 82?
Yeah, 83.
Who was the DJ at the time at the studio? It's kind of tough to tell in that era,
I wasn't into DJs or aware of them because although I was never, up until then, I wasn't a disco bunny, as you recall back in those days. I was new wave. I was rock and roll. I wasn't a heavy radio person. I was more into Brian Eno. I was more into Robert Fripp. I lived down in Tribeca in the very, very beginnings of Soho. I'd go walk up the street on Saturday afternoon on West Broadway, and that was all closed stores. You were like in the country. There was nobody there, and I lived in an art building and swept the floor for free rent, and it only had cold running water. I'd go to my friend's house to take a shower.
So I guess you were alternative before there was even a thing called alternative.
Yeah, it wasn't called alternative. I mean, before, when I left home at 14, I was in the city and I met all kinds of crazy, go to parties and stuff. So I went to Andy Warhol's factory and hung out with those people. My friend Sherry Vanilla is still a sweet friend. She lives out in California. She's working for Vangelis right now. I know her. I hung out with Warhol crowd and all the freaks, John Sex, Klaus Nomi, all these people that were kind of cool. Ann Magnuson, the actress, she used to hang out with us all the time. It was, the people who hung out. You hung out at the Mud Club. You hung out at Danceteria. These Max's Kansas City, CBGBs. And that's what I was doing. And I was going home experimenting with my synthesizer.
Speaking of Klaus, why don't you give us a crash course in Klaus Nomi?
Klaus was a guy from Germany who sang opera, but he was also into new wave and all that kind of stuff. He was older than the rest of us. Klaus never told us how old he was, but I think he was in his 30s while we were in our early to mid 30s while we were in our 20s. He came to New York. He wanted to do something. He wanted to be some sort of probably an opera singer, moved into the East Village because that's what he could afford, and became part of the local scene just by going out. There was something called the New Wave Vaudeville Show. Klaus was a baker. He knew how to make pastries by trade. So he would do his bakery stuff during the day and just go out as a regular guy at night to, the clubs, the gay clubs, wherever he went. And there was a New Wave Vaudeville show at Irving Plaza. And I was friends with Lance Loud, who had that TV show called American Family or something. He was the Channel 13. It was the first reality show where cameras took an American family in the Midwest and went in, just filmed every week and stuff like that, and whatever happened. It was the very first reality show ever. It was on PBS, and Lance came out publicly, on the thing, and it made the front pages of the news. So Lance was now a celebrity, and he took me to Andy Warhol parties because they all loved him, So Lance called me up and said, "You have a synthesizer. Disco is dead right now. Why don't we do a Donna Summer, I Feel Love version of Anarchy in the UK?" And I hope that people will boo us. He said they'll probably boo us and throw things at us, which will be cool, because I forgot, somebody said any kind of reaction is better than no reaction. So if we get a bad reaction, it's a good reaction. Blah, 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 art theory, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I said, sure, why the fuck not? So, and it's Anarchy in the UK, and we had leisure suits on, and I had my synthesizer, and we did it. It was kind of stupid and silly and fun. And we were up in the dressing room, and the next thing, the music stops, and I hear this opera, and I'm like, what? And somebody comes running and goes, "Dude, you have to see this. You have to come on down to the stage. You have to see this." I went, they had a balcony, and I leaned off the balcony and looked at the stage, and the curtain opens, and Claus Nomi is standing there in makeup, like David Bowie kind of makeup with pointed hairdo, which was meant to represent a crown, and he's singing live, not lip syncing, live, this opera music to, I think, Samson and Delilah or something, but in a clear plastic rain suit with a strobe light and a smoke machine. And it's like, what the fuck is that? So he came back upstairs, and I said, "Klaus, wow." He goes, yeah, I like your music too. You make like Giorgio Moroder, Donna Summer. Maybe we work together someday. I do opera and synthesizer, yeah? And I was like, yeah, okay. So trade numbers, and Klaus called me. If you go on my website, there's a weird, rare recording of me barely knowing how to use my synthesizer doing I Feel Love, and Klaus made up his own language. So he's kind of singing his own language version of I Feel Love in his make-believe language. Klaus blew up on the local scene, got a bunch of news and stuff like that, and then he started getting mid-size. He got signed to RCA Records. I helped him do his album, but he was kind of always away on tour and all that kind of stuff. And then one of my friends called me and said, Klaus is in the hospital. I said, in the hospital? He goes, well, he has that weird new thing called GRID. I said, what's GRID? It's gay-related immune deficiency. There wasn't AIDS in those days. It's GRID. I said, and what's that? Because, well, they're not sure, but we can go up and visit him, but we have to wear a hospital gown and mask, and, he's in isolation, and, you have to wear gloves, and, don't touch the doorknob or the toilet seat syndrome, you know what I mean?
Like a hazmat suit.
And we went in, and Klaus was sitting there in the hospital, pretty scared, and they were giving him penicillin. And they said, well, if they give you penicillin, you'll be cured. They didn't even know what it was.
Wow.
And he got real sick, and then he got the Kaposi, the cancer, which with lesions on the skin, and bang, he was like, in those days the virus was so strong it killed you in like 3 months, 6 months, you know what I mean? You were gone.
So he went from the time he was sick to the time he passed was...
Oh, it's very, it was 6 months, maybe, I don't even think a year. There's a great movie out there called The Nomi Song. I'm in it too, but it basically talks about him and his whole, his career, and Kenny Scharf, Keith Haring. Those are people that we hung around with. I hung around with Keith Haring, and they hung out in a mud club, and before they were famous. I remember seeing Keith Haring's paintings on the, on the subway, and I said, oh, did you see those really cool graffiti things? They're everywhere. And someone said, well, those are Keith's. And I'm like, Keith who? And they said, Keith Haring. And I'm like, that little nerd with the Drew Carey glasses, you know what I mean? What? Yeah, that little quiet guy that sits in the corner. Yeah, it was cute stuff. So
He did all the covers for Malcolm and stuff, and a lot of...
Yeah, he did a cover for us, too. We did a man-to-man thing at the gym, and Paul Zone, the lead singer, actually has it. I wish I had it. It would have been worth a fortune, but he did a cover for us, too.
It's definitely good stuff. What about Jean-Michel Basquiat? Was he around as well?
I didn't know him. I mean, I knew the name, but I didn't know him. Yeah.
A little bit more on different scene, or?
Yeah, there were a lot of people around. It was a bit cliquish. So you either knew your people or you didn't, it was this people, this little clique and that little group. And I mean, we're all together and, nobody gave people attitude or anything like that. But, at the club, you searched out your friends and kind of hung out with them. You held court. You sat down and everybody sat around you and you were either the center of it or you were on the out fringes of it, or you found another group that you kind of hung out with, little cliques and groups and stuff like that.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the photographer George DeBose?
George did a whole bunch of stuff of mine. I just spoke to him a little while ago. He photographed me a couple of times in the studio and in his studio. Michael Halsman, too. Halsman.
I was on George's site recently. I saw the pictures of you. You're in a couple of the photos with Klaus, actually, on the site.
Yeah. I asked him. I said I could love to have him from my website, and he hinted that it would be, $5,000 to $10,000 if I wanted to buy them. And I was like, thank you, George, but I don't need them that bad.
Pretty cool stuff. He did a lot of promo stuff for like Soulsonic and. Yeah,
he was the hip photographer. Christopher Makos photographed me very early. I was 15, 16 years old. He did the Andy Warhol book and did a lot of the covers for Interview magazine and stuff like that.
Was DeBose like pretty much the go-to guy at that point, or? No,
there weren't go-to guys then. Those were hungry photographers that went to you. You didn't go to them, they went to you. You didn't, it wasn't like today, like, go get a video guy, go get a photographer. They were photographers. Hi, my name is George, can I take your picture? It's like, yeah, cool, dude, You must be an artist, too, okay.
Yeah, part of the movement and whatnot.
Yeah. See, I watched the Claus Nomi movie. I also watched the Wigstock movie, which was a little thing that happened in the East Village on Labor Day. All the queens would get together, put on a wig, and go have a concert in the park. And they'd pack Thompson Square Park, and it'd be a whole big giant goof. You know what I mean? They would do silly stuff, but you'd get you get the light, and you get RuPaul, and you get people that came in that had a little bit of a name, and so on and so on. And I'm watching it, and when I go through the East Village, I used to remember going through the East Village and there were freaks. Somebody would have purple hair, somebody would have a mohawk, somebody had, a bone through their nose, and they just walking down the street and, hey, they were punk, they were gay, they were tranny, they were fetish, they were goth, and I go there now and it's all kind of yuppies pushing baby carriages, complaining that the neighborhood is awful, you know what I mean, we have to sterilize it, so our $1 million apartments are safe and all that kind of stuff. But back then, people were individuals. They were individual artists, and no matter how whacked out they were an artist, and they were free to express. Each individual person was an individual person, had something unique to bring to the table, whether it was the scene, whether it was the art world, the music world, whatever. And you walked up to somebody and said, "Well, yeah, I'm a singer, I'm a musician, I'm an artist." You went, "Oh, cool, great, you're surviving, respect you." It wasn't, and you were accepted, and you were, what kind of art do you do? There was a guy, Richard Tuttle. He took a little piece of minimal artist. He took a 1-inch piece of rope, whitewashed it, and put it on a white wall. Tiny little fucking thing. And it went for $5,000, $10,000 or whatever. He was an artist. You know what I mean? Whether he was a bullshit artist or, he was an artist. He came up and he was respected. So things were different. Klaus was one of those artists, you know what I mean? And Klaus went. Klaus was one of the first people to go. But people, George, Klaus, all these other people were, Annie Leibovitz, all these people were just, people on the scene. Well, if you were a photographer, you went to clubs and found the club kids and took pictures of them. What was
Klaus's press like at the time when he was still living? What was their feel for
it was really weird and slow. People couldn't deal with it. Then we played at Hurrah's, and Channel 4 and Channel 5 News covered it on the 5 o'clock thing, and by 10 o'clock at night there was a line around the corner.
Wow.
And then from then on, it was sort of like when Klaus had a presence. When he walked into a room, Klaus used to walk down the East Village. He had a fake, an electric blue fake fur, like a bathroom rug fake fur coat, giant overcoat. And he'd wear that and walk down the street, and people would just like, what the fuck is that? And when Klaus walked into a room, he was never bitchy. He was never evil. Even the most annoying person that came up to him, he would smile and say hello and stop and talk. Whether you were that junkie girl that hung out on the corner and said, yo, what's up, Klaus? Or the guy who ran the corner store, or David Bowie, he treated you all even, all the same. So when Klaus walked into a room, he wouldn't just walk into it. He'd walk into the room, find where the light is by the door, stop for a second, smile, and scan the room like, hello, 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 hello. And people are like, what's that guy doing at the door smiling? Whoa, he must be somebody important. And it built the myth. It built the celebrity of Klaus.
I guess you just project enough, and it won't be long for people to believe.
You could project in a fake sort of way, which a lot of people do now. Yeah, that's right. I'm here, and I got a record out, and me and my whole. It's not about that. It's about having something. You know what I mean? You don't need to do that. You could walk in the room and not say a word, and everybody turns around and looks at you. And that's what a real star is about. You know what I mean? Since we're so fixated on that kind of shit.
Just the vibe, I guess, you put off,
Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, yeah. It's an inner thing. It's a soul, spiritual, whatever you call it. It's not something you can put into words. It's something you can develop, but it has nothing to do with, anything that you say, anything that you wear, how your hair is cut. It's when you walk into a room, there's a presence.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what really matters, I guess, yeah.
And it's strong enough to stop the rest of the room.
Did you guys ever hear from, the Pistols or, Donna Summer regarding the cover, or
no?
Get any feedback from them?
No.
Were you expecting it?
No, totally. I mean, there wasn't that kind of. She was disco, and we were new wave, so that wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened. And later, Donna Summer became a born-again Christian, and the Sex Pistols were too busy with the aftermath of all their shit, you know what I mean, to even...
With Sid and everything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we hung out at Chelsea Hotel, with Lance Loud and Sid and Nancy and all those people, but they were just kind of like kids that I kind of went to the club with. You know what I mean? They weren't
Nonchalant, yeah.
Yeah, it was because of what Tom Verlaine television. You had Talking Heads and B-52s and Fred Schneider. He's kind of like that weird, pale, goofy-looking gay guy part of B-52s that was kind of hanging out, and hi, and I'd go over and speak to my friend Linda, and Fred Schneider. Hey Linda, what's going on? Oh, you recognize their face, or you knew them from the thing. And hi Fred, hi, what are you doing? Okay, fine. And hey Linda, we're gonna go downstairs and go to CBGB's. You want to come? All right, I'll be down in a minute, and then you'd leave. You know what I mean? And it was like that.
Just another day.
Yeah, just another day. So Sid and Nancy and those people were just kind of I mean, we knew they were a little fucked up. I didn't shoot heroin, and they did. They'd be nodding out. I used to see Billy Idol. I remember seeing him on the corner of it's like downtown on Christopher Street or 7th Avenue, junkied out in the corner. His friends are lifting him up, taking him away. He was went down to buy some shit, did it, and couldn't make it all the way back up to the train or the cab or whatever it was.
Was that like the Generation X days?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It was, it was kind of slightly towards the end of New Wave and, not quite New Romantics, kind of Generation X was more 90s, right? I mean, late 80s. But
I mean, the band that Billy was in.
Oh, yeah.
Just before he was in the solo career took off.
Yeah. Well, at the very beginning of it, when he's still a fucking mess. hey, what can I say? I'm not letting out any, Hollywood Babylon revelations here.
That's definitely been more than talked about over the years.
Hey, he shot heroin and I sucked dick. What can I say?
That sounds like the name of an album.
There you go for a quote. How about that? There you go.
That'll get the readers.
What's that?
That'll get the readers immediately.
Hey, there you go. He shot heroin, I sucked dick, man, Parrish.
Details inside.
Yeah, details inside, news at 11. But, it was different. It was a lot different. Definitely a lot different.
Let's shift gears here and talk about hip-hop bebop.
Mm-hmm.
What would anything particular inspire the track, or?
Hip-hop bebop was an ambient track that I did, and I played with my drum machine. It started out as an 8-track thing. I laid down the track and the sequencer line and the bass line, and some of the whooshes and all that kind of stuff. And it was just this, art thing that I did with a drum machine. It was a ear candy. And then I got my record deal by doing a song called Heatstroke on my first album. A friend of mine was an editor of a men's magazine, adult magazine, and said, I know this guy Joe Gage. He's doing porno movies, and he needs a soundtrack for his next movie. And I mentioned that you're a musician. If you talk to him, maybe you can make some money, doing a soundtrack. So I called up, and he said, yeah, I need 10 minutes of music here, 5 minutes of music there, 12 minutes of music here. And he said, I said, how much? And he said, $1,000. And I went, wow, a whole $1,000. Wow, I'm going to be rich. I fucking made $200 a month maybe back then,
Right.
I said, sure. And I didn't even get to see the damn thing. He just said, I need 5 minutes. I need one piece 5 minutes, 5:08. I need another one 12:16. I need another one 3:02, and another one 7:04, and whatever. And I delivered him all the stuff on reel to reel. And he said, I need. There's one stretch that runs for 6 or 7 minutes, and it's about a guy who goes to town and he's in the peep show arcades, and and he's putting quarters in, and all the girls are stripping, and showing their tits to him and all that kind of stuff, and he's sitting there jerking off looking at them. So that's how I got, okay, pocket full of money, and I'm going to town. I'm going to find a lady who could move to the sound downtown, blah, 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 blah. And it was called Heatstroke. So that happened as an 8-track. He released it. And then there was a DJ who played the Anvil Club in New York, which was, God, that place was out of control. There was Uber, the bald, fire-eating drag queen. There was Toby, who would sit on fire hydrant size dildos, and shoot them across the room over people's heads. It was quite a place. Underground talent, most definitely. And the place opened up at midnight and went till noon the next day. And, people were fucked out of their minds, like vampires coming out into the sunlight, walking through the meatpacking district to get home, in leather outfits with their nipples and their asses hanging out,
Ducking hydrants.
Yeah, exactly, So somebody said, they're playing your music at the Anvil. I said, what? Because that song you did, Heatstroke, this DJ, Lance Weiss, keeps spinning it. I said, no, I didn't sell it. He goes, no, it is, you got to go. So, of course, I found it when he's playing. I go, I hang out, and I hear my song. And I crawl up to the DJ booth, and I remember looking over the ledge, and I see it spinning on vinyl. And I said, where'd you get that record? He goes, it's cool, isn't it? It's really cool. I said, dude, I did that record. He goes, what? I said, that's my record. I did it for a movie called Heatstroke. He goes, you're kidding me. He goes, the record label is dying to find who did this. Next day I'm up on the record label, and I signed like a 1-page bullshit record deal, which I'm still fighting in court. But that's how I got that out. They asked me, do I have any other music? And I brought them some cassettes of the stuff that I did, and they heard hip-hop bebop in the raw. So we bumped it up to 24-inch. And we were going to the Fun House looking for ideas. People used to bark at the Fun House. That's where we got the dog thing from. Woo, woo, woo. Because when people heard records at the Fun House, they would bark if they liked it, and they would boo if they didn't like it. So we threw back to these kids at the Fun House what they were throwing at the DJ. So the DJ loved it because he was throwing it back at them. Here's a record that's barking, so you don't have to. And John Roby, who did Planet Rock and all that other stuff, was hired to come in. He put in some of the keyboard comping parts and the little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And there was no form to the record. There's no verse, chorus, bridge, intro. It was all literally made in the mix. We ran the tape, turned off the first 10 channels, and turned on the channels 12, 13, and 14 on the 24 track and turned everything off. Ran it for 30 seconds, and then rewound the tape and did another configuration and another configuration and another configuration. And we had 3 or 4 reels of just millions of outtakes. And they took it away, and in those days they were doing MDA. And they fucking did MDA from Friday to Sunday and edited this thing together. And they played it for me, and I said, no way, you're not putting this out with my name on it. There's no verse, there's no chorus, there's no bridge, there's no song here. I'm going to be the laughing stock. This is not going to be my record. Well, bango, look what happened, right? You know? Boy, did I get a lesson. So was it some conceived, art piece that I was, the master, did I have a wizard's hat on with a wand and I waved it over the mixing board and, laid down these tracks, calculated? No. But it was a feeling. It was an expression. It was like an expressionist painting that became, it was an audio expressionist painting, that was kind of formed together into some sort of a form.
If you had done the editing, would the final product have been different?
A million times different. What? I don't know. But I was more into the only music that I knew, other than the ambient music that I made, which I called sound sculptures, were structured music. There wasn't a lot of free-form dub music. That was one of the first club dub sound records. There's no verse, chorus, and bridge in there.
You're kind of just like natural progressions.
It's progressions and waves of sound, capsules of sound that are strung together that work.
How long did the track take to produce, do you recall?
Well, I probably did it in an afternoon. I was very fast. I could punch out an album in 4 or 5 days if I wanted to. I was manic. I would turn on my computer, my sequencer, turn on my 8-track tape recorder, and I could finish records in 4 to 6 hours, soup to nuts, including the mix.
So was that one of the first tracks you did? Was that like...
No, I was doing for years I was doing a lot of Eno-esque, sound things, slowing the tape recorder down,
experimental,
slowing tape loops, totally experimental for years and years and years, because I didn't know how to write music. That I learned as I went along.
Right.
You know what I mean? You asked me what's a G7 augmented chord, and show me the fingering on a keyboard. I'll what? Isn't there a plug-in for that for my sequencer?
Yeah, right.
It can make one.
Can't we build one?
Yeah, exactly.
When you were doing the record, did you feel anything different than the other records you had done?
Yeah, it was definitely one of my little. I probably went deeper. I dug a little deeper for with feeling-wise with it.
I'm saying, did it feel any more special to you than the other things you had done?
Was it a hit? Did I know it was a hit? No, but I liked it because it was a little clearer, a little cleaner than some of the other stuff I was doing. Some of the stuff was just big washes of sound. This had a beat to it. This had a kind of a groove to it, and I listened to Kraftwerk. So man-made, hip-hop, bebop, all those things were even together again, which turned into a pop record after it was put on the 2-inch. That stuff that I did, I was into Kraftwerk, and I was emulating what I heard. What I felt, not what I heard, what I felt.
So you point directly to Kraftwerk then, as far as...
Dude, 1970, whatever the year is for, 1976... I remember sitting in a taxi cab. I was living on 71st and Central Park West, and I took a cab from probably when I was working at CBS on 50-something and 6th. And the cab driver had NEW on. No, actually, it was at night because it was Alison Steele, the Nightbird, the DJ.
Wow.
Who I thought was a sexy mama, and then when I saw her someplace, I was like, that beat-up old bitch is, thinking she looks like, Pamela Anderson. It's always that way with DJ personalities. They have these incredible, sexy voices, and then you see them in real person, you're going, what happened?
You're too ugly for radio.
Too ugly for TV, so they're on radio. But she played this is Alison Steele, the Nightbird, with Kraftwerk, Autobahn. And I remember just being stunned by this record, and so did the cab driver. We sat out in front of my house. He stopped the meter. I paid him, and we were just staring at the radio. Because you got to remember, they were playing Led Zeppelin, they were playing Uriah Heep, they were playing Grand Funk Railroad, and this thing came on, which was completely different from anything you've ever heard before.
Totally different, yeah.
Totally different. So I got sucked into that. That's how I got into my electronic stuff.
So that cab ride was actually the moment for you?
It probably was. I went out and I bought a Radio Shack do-it-yourself Heathkit a Radio Shack synthesizer that you build. You solder the things together. A friend helped me. And I was smoking pot in those days. I was 16, 17 years old. And my friend had Altec Lansing speakers and a Heathkit amplifier, probably 200-300 watts, which was a lot in those days with these giant 15-inch speakers with horns. And I would lower the lights. I'd put on my the black light, and you had the black light poster with all the positions on it. And you had one of those lamps that had a bulb, but as the heat rose, it spun it around, so it made psychedelic pictures on the wall. And I turn on the synthesizer and turn the fucking thing up and make whooshing space sounds and wow, wow, wow. And I'm stoned out of my gourd. And people, probably, if you looked at my door, there would be like lights flashing from underneath and these weird sounds. They probably thought the aliens were landing in my living room. They would avoid me in the hallway, kind of like, like in those funny movies where somebody suddenly hits the wall and slides past you, And, of course, the smell of pot was just reeking out of the place, They
didn't know what to make of you.
Someone started selling us pot with angel dust in it, which I didn't know about, Oh, I got this really strong good shit. Yeah, give it to me. Well, I started freaking out, and ever since then I wasn't able to handle getting high anymore, you know what I mean? It was not very comfortable tripping your brains out on angel dust, having a bad trip. With freaky synthesizer sounds, I almost jumped out of a window. So that was my, I remember leaning out of the window, and the street below me was convex up against I could feel when people walked by, and I was on the 5th floor, people walked by and cars went by, I could feel them kind of brushing against my face, and I'm like, hot and stuffy in here, and I'm going to walk, I'm going to take a walk. Thank God.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank God. And it was like after that, I just couldn't deal with getting high anymore. Not that I have anything against it, but...
For you, that was the end of your smoking career.
Yeah, I was into my smoking, getting high trip, and all that kind of stuff. I worked at the Metropolitan Opera House. I went to high school performing arts. I used to do AIDA tripping.
AIDA tripping, unbelievable.
We would drop mushrooms, we would drop organic mescaline, and we'd do Tosca, on acid. I was an extra on stage. I used to get paid $10 a scene to put on body paint and armor and walk across the stage, and inevitably a horse would take a shit and you'd be ankles deep in it and you'd have to stand there. But you're tripping your brains out because pretty little lights and notes are flying out of their mouth. And we'd have fight scenes that we'd have to organize and choreograph, and you had to die by a certain part of the music, and I'd be standing there like, oh, that was a beautiful light. the prompter would go, lay down.
You're missing your cue.
Yeah, lay down. Oh, dude, look at lay down. Oh, okay.
You're ruining my trip.
Yeah.
Where did you record Hip Hop Bebop? At your house?
I had to record at my house, and then it was later done at Vanguard Studios on 21st Street, where AEIOU was recorded, where Soulsonic Force was recorded.
Twilight 22 probably too, right?
Yeah, all that shit, because it was part of Vanguard Records. They had a studio. It was a jazz studio. It was a huge hall, but you could put a giant orchestra in it. But the control control room had a MCI machine and board, very little outboard gear. They had a reverb plate, and the studio was sitting there dead. So they would rent it for $100 for several hours. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah. And so all these local producers that couldn't afford $100 an hour for, some of the better studios, you can get this $100 for 4 hours. And if you went between midnight and 6 a.m., you could probably get the whole thing for $200 for 6 hours, 8 hours. We used to pull those shifts too.
Wow.
And I came in many times, my emulator, my Prophet 5 under my arm. You just put my Lindrum, my 808. You didn't have a flight case for it. You put it on your lap in a cab.
Yeah, right. In a Glad bag.
You didn't even you wouldn't even glad bag. I'd sit on the subway, like, what the fuck? When I realized now I had my Prophet 5, across my lap on a subway, on the bus, oh my shit, those things were $2,500, $3,000 when they first came out.
And you're schlubbing it on the subway.
Yeah, exactly. Banging it into the poles. You know what I mean? There I am sitting in you walked in and the studio, and if you made a right, it would kind of make an L hallway and go into this giant room.